Michael Thompson loved quiet mornings more than anything else. He had always believed that the world spoke in soft voices before sunrise. When the air was still and the sky began to blush with faint streaks of orange, he felt closest to the peace he had searched for his whole life. Behind his house stretched a small, sparkling lake that mirrored the changing skies. It was not a grand lake that filled travel magazines, but to Michael it was a treasure. It was the place where he thought most clearly and where he built memories with his daughter Emma. Emma was 10 years old, bright-eyed, and full of curiosity. Most mornings, she tiptoed into the kitchen while her father prepared coffee. She would wrap a light sweater around her shoulders and whisper, "Is it time to fish yet, Dad?" He always smiled and nodded. Together they carried their fishing poles and a small tackle box down a narrow grassy path that led directly from their backyard to the water's edge. For years they had followed this gentle routine. They spoke in low voices as they set their lines. Sometimes they said nothing at all, listening instead to the soft sounds of the lake, the plop of a fish, the distant hoot of an owl heading home, the first chatter of birds beginning their day. These mornings became their tradition. They were not about catching fish to eat. They were about sharing time, telling small stories, and letting the calm of the lake wash over them both. One bright Tuesday in early spring, the routine was broken. The morning sun was still low when the mail carrier left a thick envelope in the mailbox at the front gate. Michael did not notice it until later in the day. He brought it inside with the usual stack of letters and bills, setting everything on the wooden kitchen table that once belonged to his grandfather. After lunch, he began sorting through the pile. There were a few advertisements, a notice from the electric company, and then a large envelope with the return address of the Lakewood Meadows Homeowners Association. The bold letters across the front made him pause. He and Emma had lived in this house for 6 years, and while the HOA occasionally sent newsletters about gardening tips or holiday decorations, they had never sent anything that looked so formal. Michael slid a finger under the flap and opened it carefully. Inside was a printed letter with official-looking language. As his eyes scanned the page, his brow tightened. The letter stated that he owed a fine of $3,200 for what it called unauthorized fishing on community property. It explained that new regulations had been adopted by the HOA board the previous month and that fishing was no longer allowed without a special permit. The words felt heavy and strange. Michael read them twice, hoping he had misunderstood. He looked out the back window where the lake shimmered under the afternoon light. The idea of being fined for fishing in the very lake that touched his own land felt unreal. The property deed, which he kept in a safe drawer, clearly stated that the lake access behind his house was included in the purchase of the home. He had every right to walk down to that water whenever he wished. Emma came bouncing into the kitchen with a sketchbook in hand. She was drawing a heron they had seen earlier that week. Seeing her bright smile, Michael folded the letter quickly. But Emma noticed his serious face. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice curious but gentle. Michael hesitated. He didn't want to worry her, but he also believed in honesty. He showed her the letter and explained, in simple words, what it meant. Emma's eyes widened. "But we didn't do anything bad. The fish are free. And the lake is ours too, right?" "That's right," Michael said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This must be a mistake. We'll figure it out." That evening, after Emma went to bed, Michael spread documents across the table. He pulled out the old folder containing his property deed and all the papers he had received when buying the house. He read through them carefully, underlining the sentence that gave him full and permanent access to the lake and shoreline behind the property. The wording was clear. There was no mention of needing any permit. Despite the proof in front of him, a knot of worry formed in his chest. He had heard stories from neighbors about the HOA being strict with lawn lengths and mailbox colors, but he had never imagined they would try to fine him thousands of dollars for something so natural and peaceful. The next morning, Michael decided to call the number listed on the letter. After a few rings, a cheerful recorded message directed him to leave a voicemail. He explained who he was, read his property number aloud, and politely asked for clarification. Hours later, a short email arrived from the HOA office confirming that the fine was real and that payment was expected within 30 days. The message included one final sentence: failure to pay will result in legal action. Michael leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. The words sounded like a threat, and for a moment he felt a flicker of anger. But he quickly steadied himself. He had faced challenges before losing his job a few years earlier, raising Emma after her mother moved to another state. He had learned that staying calm and patient was the best way forward. That night, he stood by the sliding glass door that overlooked the lake. The moonlight painted a silver path across the water. He remembered the times he had fished there with his own father when he was a boy. His father used to say, "This lake will always give you peace if you treat it with respect." Michael smiled sadly at the memory. Emma joined him quietly, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "It's pretty tonight," she whispered. "It is," Michael agreed. "And we're not going to let anyone take it away from us." Emma rested her head on his arm. "Grandpa would tell them we have a right to be here." Michael chuckled softly. Yes, he would. Over the next few days, Michael spoke with a few neighbors. Some had also received letters, though their fines were smaller warnings for leaving kayaks near the shore or for trimming trees without permission. Several neighbors shrugged it off, saying it was easier to pay than to fight. But a retired teacher named Helen, who lived 2 houses down, encouraged him to stand his ground. "They count on people being too tired to resist," she said during a friendly chat at the mailbox. "But you have every right to fish. Don't give in." Her words stayed with him. By the weekend, Michael had made a decision. He would not pay a fine for something he knew was unjust. He gathered every document proving his ownership rights, placed them in a neat binder, and marked his calendar for the next HOA meeting. On Sunday night, he told Emma his plan. "We're going to the meeting together," he said. "It might be long, and they might not be friendly, but we need to show them we won't be pushed around." Emma nodded with the seriousness of someone far older than her years. "I'll come. Maybe they'll listen if we tell them about the mornings on the lake." Michael smiled, feeling both proud and protective. "Maybe they will," he said. But inside he wondered if the board was ready to listen at all. As the sun set behind the pine trees that evening, Michael stood once more at the water's edge. The lake reflected shades of pink and gold. He felt the cool breeze and heard the soft splash of a fish breaking the surface. This place was more than a backyard feature. It was part of his family's story, a link between the past and the present. He tightened his grip on the fishing rod in his hand and whispered to himself, "This is our home. We will not let them take this piece from us." The evening of the Homeowners Association meeting arrived with a heavy sky and the promise of rain. Michael Thompson parked his truck near the Lakewood Meadows clubhouse and sat for a moment before turning off the engine. The headlights reflected off the neat brick building where the meeting would take place. Inside, he knew, the people who claimed authority over the neighborhood were waiting to defend the large fine they had placed on his family. Beside him, his 10-year-old daughter Emma adjusted her small backpack. She had insisted on coming, and Michael had finally agreed. He wanted her to see that standing up for what is right did not require shouting or anger, only patience and truth. "Are you nervous, Dad?" she asked quietly. "A little," Michael admitted, giving her a reassuring smile. "But we're ready. We just need to stay calm and tell the truth. The documents will speak for us." Together they stepped out of the truck. A cool wind moved through the parking lot, carrying the scent of pine trees and the faint ripple of the nearby lake. Michael took one last deep breath and held the door open for Emma. Inside the clubhouse, rows of folding chairs faced a long table where 5 board members sat. At the center was Linda Harris, the HOA president, wearing a crisp navy jacket and a polished smile that did not reach her eyes. Beside her were 4 other members, including Robert White, a man known for his strict opinions about lawn care. Several neighbors filled the chairs, some holding copies of the evening's agenda. The room buzzed with quiet chatter until Linda tapped a small wooden gavel. "This meeting of the Lakewood Meadows Homeowners Association is now in session," she announced. Her voice was firm, carrying across the room. Michael and Emma took a seat near the front. Michael placed a binder of property documents on his lap, ready for the moment when he would need to speak. After discussing routine matters like spring landscaping and the upcoming neighborhood picnic, Linda cleared her throat. "Next on the agenda," she said, "is the violation notice concerning Mr. Michael Thompson of Pineview Drive." All eyes turned toward Michael. He felt Emma squeeze his hand. He rose calmly, holding the binder close to his chest, and approached the board. "Good evening," he began, keeping his voice steady. "I received a letter saying I owe a fine of $3,200 for fishing in the lake behind my property. I am here to explain that this fine is not correct. My deed gives me full rights to use that lake." He opened the binder and held up the property document. "Here is a copy of the deed, signed when I purchased the home 6 years ago. It clearly states that I have permanent access to the lake and shoreline." Linda leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "last month the board approved a new rule requiring permits for all fishing activities on the lake. It applies to every homeowner. Your fine stands." "With respect," Michael replied, "a new rule can't remove a right that is already written into a property deed. My access isn't a neighborhood favor, it is part of the land I purchased. And no one informed me before issuing a fine." Robert White frowned. "Rules are rules. If we let one person ignore them, everyone will." Michael met his gaze. "I'm not ignoring rules. I'm saying this one cannot take away my legal rights. There was no notice, no discussion, and no time for homeowners to prepare. That is not fair." Murmurs moved through the audience. Some neighbors nodded quietly. Others avoided eye contact, not wanting to be seen choosing sides. Emma, who had been silent until now, stood beside her father and spoke in a clear, small voice. "We fish because it makes us happy. We never hurt the lake. Grandpa taught us to take care of it." A soft hush settled over the room. Michael rested a hand on her shoulder, proud of her courage. Linda's expression hardened. "Mr. Thompson, the fine is due in 30 days. If it is not paid, further action will be taken. That is all we have to say." Michael remained calm, though his heart pounded. "I will not pay a fine for something that is not lawful," he said. "I will protect my family's rights. If necessary, I will seek legal help." Linda raised the gavel again. "Then this discussion is closed," she said sharply. "We will proceed with our agenda." Michael returned to his seat beside Emma. A few neighbors gave him small, supportive smiles. Helen, the retired teacher who had encouraged him earlier, leaned forward and whispered, "You did well. Don't let them scare you." After the meeting ended, several people approached quietly. A young couple introduced themselves as Mark and Diane. "We've had trouble with them too," Mark said in a low voice. "They fined us for trimming a tree that was on our own land. We can't keep letting them do this." Another neighbor, an older man named Charles, added, "They think no one will fight back. But you have a strong case. The deed is the law." Michael thanked them all. Their quiet support strengthened his resolve. Outside, the night air felt cool and fresh compared to the tension inside. Emma walked beside him, her small steps matching his. "You were amazing, Dad," she said. "So were you," he replied, smiling down at her. "I'm proud of you for speaking up." The next morning, Michael organized his documents again, double-checking every detail. He called a local attorney named Sarah Mitchell, who had a reputation for helping homeowners in difficult disputes. After hearing the situation, Sarah agreed to meet him the following day. When they sat down in her office, Sarah studied the deed carefully. "This is clear," she said. "Your right to the lake cannot be removed by a rule change. If they try to enforce the fine, we can challenge it in court. And we can win." Relief washed over Michael, but he still felt a trace of sadness. He had chosen Lakewood Meadows for its quiet beauty and friendly community. He had not expected conflict. That evening he and Emma walked down the familiar path to the water. The lake reflected the soft colors of twilight. Emma skipped a stone across the surface, sending ripples outward. "Do you think they'll stop, Dad?" she asked. "I hope so," Michael answered. "But if they don't, we'll keep standing up for what's right. This lake belongs to us as much as anyone. Maybe more, because we care for it." Emma nodded, her face calm but thoughtful. "Grandpa would be proud," she said. Michael felt his throat tighten. He thought of his late father and the many lessons he had shared about honesty and courage. "Yes," he said softly, "I think he would be." Over the next week, letters and emails went back and forth between Sarah Mitchell and the HOA's lawyer. The association insisted on payment, but Sarah's replies were firm and professional, quoting sections of property law that protected Michael's rights. Meanwhile, subtle changes began to show in the neighborhood. Neighbors who once stayed silent started greeting Michael with nods of quiet approval. A few even dropped by to share their own stories of unfair fines and sudden rule changes. Helen visited one afternoon with a plate of homemade cookies. "You've given people hope," she said with a kind smile. "Sometimes it just takes one person to remind everyone that fairness matters." Michael thanked her and offered her a seat on the porch. They watched the sun set over the lake, the water glowing gold in the fading light. For the first time in days, Michael felt a sense of calm return. He knew the battle was not over. The HOA might push harder, but he also knew he was no longer standing alone. That night, as Emma slept peacefully, Michael sat by the window and looked out over the moonlit water. The lake was still, a mirror of the starry sky above. He thought of the meeting, of the sharp words and the quiet support from neighbors, and of Emma's brave little voice speaking up for their family. Whatever came next, he understood something important: the strength of a family is not measured by the absence of conflict, but by the courage to face it together. With that thought warming his heart, he turned off the light and let the calm rhythm of the lake guide him into a restful sleep. The morning began with a thin layer of mist drifting over the lake, the kind that made the water look like a sheet of silver. Michael Thompson stood at the kitchen counter, waiting for the coffee to brew. The soft gurgle of the machine usually brought him comfort, but today it felt like background noise to a deeper tension inside him. He opened the front door to collect the mail, half expecting another notice from the homeowners association. A stack of envelopes lay neatly in the box. Most were ordinary utility bills, a letter from a friend, but one heavy, official-looking envelope carried the return address of a law office. His heart sank. Michael carried the mail to the table and sat down. He slid a finger under the flap of the large envelope. Inside were several sheets of paper stamped with bold lettering. The HOA had filed a lawsuit against him for failing to pay the fishing fine. The letter stated that he owed the original amount plus legal fees, bringing the total to nearly $4,000. He read the words twice, his brow tightening with each line. Though Sarah Mitchell, his attorney, had warned that this might happen, seeing it written in legal language still sent a cold weight through his chest. Emma entered the kitchen carrying her school notebook. "What's that, Dad?" she asked. Michael folded the papers gently. "It's from the HOA's lawyer," he explained. "They want to take us to court about the fine." Emma's eyes widened. "Does that mean we have to leave the house?" Michael shook his head quickly. "No, sweetheart. We are not leaving. We have every right to be here. This is just part of the process. Remember what Miss Sarah said? We have the truth on our side." Emma nodded, but her small face showed worry. Michael reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We're going to be okay," he said softly. Later that morning, Michael drove downtown to Sarah Mitchell's office, the lawsuit papers neatly clipped inside a folder. Sarah greeted him with her usual calm confidence. Her office smelled faintly of fresh paper and coffee, and the bookshelves were filled with thick law books and framed photographs of her hiking in the mountains. "Let me take a look," she said, scanning the documents carefully. She adjusted her glasses and tapped a pen against the desk. "This is exactly what I expected. They're trying to pressure you into paying. But your deed is clear. You have legal rights to fish on that lake, and they can't change that with a simple vote." Michael exhaled slowly, the tightness in his chest easing just a little. "So what happens next?" "We'll file a formal response," Sarah explained. "Then we'll prepare for a hearing. I'll request that the court dismiss their claim based on the property deed. It may take a few weeks, but I'm confident we can win." Michael nodded. "I don't want a fight, but I can't let them bully us." "And you shouldn't," Sarah said firmly. "This isn't just about fishing. It's about protecting your home and your rights." The days that followed moved in a strange rhythm. Michael continued his normal routines, taking Emma to school, repairing a loose porch railing, tending to the small vegetable garden, but there was always the steady hum of the lawsuit in the background. Neighbors continued to show quiet support. Helen, the retired teacher, stopped by with a basket of apples. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said softly. "Stay strong, Michael. We all know you're in the right." Others waved or offered encouraging words as he walked to the mailbox. Even people he had only greeted in passing now spoke of their own frustrations with the HOA's strict rules. Despite the stress, Michael made sure to keep his mornings with Emma at the lake. They still rose before sunrise, carrying their fishing poles to the water's edge. The calm of the lake helped them both breathe easier. Emma often skipped stones across the surface while Michael cast his line. "Do you think the judge will like fishing?" she asked one morning, her voice light but curious. Michael chuckled. "I don't know. But I think the judge will like fairness. That's what matters." A few weeks later, the hearing date arrived. Michael dressed carefully in a plain navy suit, the same one he had worn to weddings and important meetings. Emma stayed home with Helen, who had offered to watch her for the day. Sarah met him outside the courthouse, her briefcase in hand. "Ready?" she asked with a reassuring smile. "As ready as I can be," Michael replied. The courtroom was modest, with wooden benches polished by years of use. The HOA board members sat together on the opposite side, their expressions tight. Linda Harris, the president, avoided Michael's eyes as she whispered to their lawyer. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The proceedings began with formal introductions and a review of the case. The HOA's lawyer argued that the new fishing permit rule applied to all residents and that Michael had ignored it. Sarah rose to speak. Her voice was steady and clear. She presented the property deed, highlighting the section granting Michael full and permanent access to the lake. She explained that this right could not be removed by a neighborhood vote or new rule. The judge listened carefully, asking questions about the timeline of the rule changes and whether residents had been properly notified. It became clear that the HOA had passed the fishing ban without informing homeowners or considering existing property rights. After reviewing the documents, the judge leaned forward. "The property deed is explicit," she said. "Mr. Thompson's right to access and use the lake is legally protected. The HOA's new rule cannot override those rights. The lawsuit is dismissed." The words settled over the room like a sudden breeze. Michael felt a wave of relief wash through him. Sarah smiled and gave a small nod. Across the aisle, the board members shifted uncomfortably. The judge added, "Furthermore, the court advises the HOA to review its procedures and ensure all future rules comply with existing property agreements." Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the morning clouds. Michael shook Sarah's hand warmly. "Thank you," he said. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You did the right thing," she replied. "That's what matters. Go home and enjoy your lake." On the drive back, Michael rolled down the windows, letting the fresh air fill the truck. The tension that had gripped him for weeks began to loosen. When he pulled into his driveway, Emma ran out to greet him, her face bright with hope. "Well?" she asked, almost bouncing on her toes. Michael knelt down and smiled. "We won. The judge said we can fish whenever we want." Emma squealed with delight and threw her arms around his neck. "I knew it," she shouted. That evening, they celebrated with a simple picnic by the lake. Michael grilled hamburgers while Emma prepared a small basket of fruit and cookies. Neighbors stopped by to congratulate them, bringing homemade dishes and cheerful words. Helen raised a glass of lemonade. "To fairness," she said warmly. "And to standing up for what's right." The small group clinked their glasses together as the sun set behind the pine trees. The lake shimmered with golden light, peaceful and calm as if it, too, approved of the outcome. As darkness settled and the stars began to appear, Michael sat beside Emma at the water's edge. She leaned against him, her fishing rod resting across her knees. "Are we safe now?" she asked softly. "Yes," Michael said, his voice gentle but firm. "No one can take this from us." They watched the moon rise over the lake, its reflection rippling across the surface. Michael felt gratitude for his daughter's courage, for Sarah's guidance, and for the quiet strength of neighbors who had shown support when it mattered most. The lawsuit had been more than a legal battle. It had tested his patience, his resolve, and his belief in fairness. And it had reminded him that some things, family, peace, the right to enjoy one's own home, were worth protecting, no matter the effort. As the night deepened and the crickets began their soft chorus, Michael and Emma stayed by the water, lines in the lake, heart steady and calm. They had faced the storm together, and now the lake, their lake, belonged to them again in every way that truly mattered. The weeks after the courtroom victory brought a sense of relief to Michael Thompson's home. Each morning the lake looked brighter, as if sharing in his family's quiet triumph. Michael and his daughter Emma returned to their peaceful routine, walking down the narrow grassy path at sunrise, their fishing poles balanced on their shoulders. They laughed freely again, and the soft ripple of the water once more felt like music. Yet the homeowners association did not disappear. The board had lost the lawsuit, but the sting of defeat seemed to push them toward petty acts. Michael began noticing small, neatly folded letters left in his mailbox. One claimed his mailbox paint was fading and in need of fresh color. Another said the grass near his back fence was slightly overgrown and must be cut within 3 days. At first Michael treated these notices as simple annoyances. He repainted the mailbox even though it looked fine. He trimmed the grass even though it was already neat. But the letters kept coming, always polite in wording but sharp in intent. One morning Emma found a notice tucked beneath the welcome mat. "Dad, they say our porch light is too bright," she said, reading it aloud with confusion. Michael sighed. "It's the same light we've had for years," he replied. He knew these were not random complaints. The HOA board was testing him, perhaps hoping to make life difficult enough that he would give in to their earlier demands. Michael tried to remain patient. He focused on his work at the local hardware store and on Emma's school projects. But the pattern continued. A warning about the angle of his driveway stones. A reminder about keeping holiday decorations within regulation size, even though it was only September and there were no decorations yet. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees, Michael sat on the back porch with a cup of tea. The lake glowed gold under the fading light. He thought about how peaceful this view had once been and how the HOA's constant interruptions had begun to cloud it. He loved his home and the small community, but he would not allow anyone to turn his quiet refuge into a place of tension. That night he walked the familiar path to the water. The lake was calm, reflecting a slice of moonlight. Emma followed him, carrying a flashlight. "Do you think they'll stop sending letters?" she asked. "I'm not sure," Michael admitted. "But I do know something important." He crouched beside her, his voice steady. "This lake belongs to our property line. Did you know that the pathway everyone uses to reach the water crosses our land?" Emma tilted her head. "You mean the little trail from the road?" "Yes," Michael said. "People from the neighborhood use it every day. It's the only easy way for them to get to the lake. The HOA can make rules, but they can't force us to keep that path open." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "So you could close it?" "I could," Michael answered. "I never thought about it before because I like sharing the lake. But if the board keeps trying to push us, maybe it's time to protect our space." Emma stayed quiet, thinking it over. She wasn't a child who liked conflict, but she understood fairness. "Would that make them stop bothering us?" she finally asked. Michael looked across the still water. "It might," he said. "And it would remind them that respect goes both ways." The idea took root in Michael's mind over the next few days. He researched property maps and double-checked his deed. It was clear, the only direct neighborhood access to the lake crossed his private land. Without his path, the HOA members would have to drive miles around to reach a small public launch on the far side, a route that few would bother to take. He discussed the idea with Sarah Mitchell, the attorney who had helped him in court. Sarah confirmed that he had the legal right to build a fence or gate along his property line, as long as it met city codes. If you choose to do this, keep everything professional, Sarah advised. Follow the building guidelines and file the proper permits. That way the HOA can't claim you're breaking any rules. Michael nodded. I'm not doing it to be cruel. I just want peace. Sarah smiled. Sometimes protecting your peace is the strongest message you can send. The next weekend Michael began planning the project. He walked the path carefully, measuring the distance from the edge of his yard to the tree line. He imagined a simple but sturdy wooden fence, tall enough for privacy yet natural enough to blend with the pine trees. Emma followed him with a small notebook, jotting down his measurements. Can we make it look pretty? She asked. Maybe with flowers along the side. Michael chuckled. Of course. This will be our fence, not a wall to hide behind. It can be beautiful. He contacted his friend Tom, a contractor who had built decks and fences throughout the area. Tom visited the property a few days later, examining the path with a practiced eye. You've got a good spot for it, Tom said. We can use cedar. It lasts long and smells great. I'll make sure the design meets every regulation so no one can complain. Perfect, Michael replied. When the first posts went into the ground, curious neighbors began to gather at a distance. Some whispered to each other, others approached to ask polite questions. What's going on, Michael? One neighbor called. Just adding a privacy fence, Michael said with a friendly smile. It's within my property lines and city codes. Nothing to worry about. Word traveled quickly, and soon the HOA board members appeared. Linda Harris herself arrived, her expression sharp as she stepped carefully onto the path. Mr. Thompson, she began, I see construction here. Have you submitted the proper paperwork to the HOA? This is private property, Michael answered calmly. I've filed the necessary permits with the city, which is all that's required. I'm simply building a fence for privacy and safety. Linda's jaw tightened. You realize this path provides lake access for many residents. I realize that, Michael said, his voice even. But the path is on my land. I have no obligation to keep it open. My family needs privacy after everything that has happened. For a moment Linda looked as though she might argue, but the presence of other neighbors, some watching with quiet approval, held her back. She turned sharply and left without another word. Over the next week the fence rose steadily, each cedar plank fitted carefully into place. Michael and Tom worked side by side, while Emma handed them tools and painted small flower boxes that would hang along the inside. The scent of fresh wood filled the air. Neighbors continued to stop by. Some offered kind words and even small gifts of support. One man brought a basket of homegrown vegetables. About time someone stood up to them, he said quietly. By the following Saturday, the fence was complete. It stretched from one side of Michael's property to the other, strong and handsome with a natural golden glow. Flower boxes lined the inside, and a small gate allowed Michael and Emma to reach the lake whenever they wished. From the outside, the path now ended at the cedar wall. That evening, Michael and Emma sat on the back porch and admired their work. The lake shimmered in the distance, untouched and private. Do you think they'll be mad? Emma asked. Maybe, Michael said with a gentle smile. But this is not about making them angry. It's about keeping our home peaceful. Sometimes you have to draw a line literally. Emma giggled. A real line, she said, pointing toward the new fence. Michael laughed softly, feeling a deep calm settle inside him. The following Monday, a letter from the HOA arrived. Michael opened it at the kitchen table while Emma watched. The letter stated that the board was concerned about restricted lake access but admitted that the fence was fully within legal boundaries. They could do nothing. Michael folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. "That's the end of it," he said. Emma's smile lit up the room. "Now it's just our lake again." Michael looked out the window at the calm water, remembering the long months of tension. He realized that the fence was more than wood and nails. It was a statement of quiet strength, a reminder that his home and his family's peace were worth protecting. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in soft purple tones, Michael and Emma walked through the gate and down to the water. The lake greeted them with gentle ripples. They cast their fishing lines into the still surface, side by side, hearts light. For the first time in many months, Michael felt that the quiet mornings he loved had returned for good. He and Emma sat together in the soft night, the cedar fence standing tall behind them, the lake stretching endless and free before them. The morning after the fence was finished, Michael Thompson woke to the gentle sound of birdsong and the soft shimmer of sunlight across his kitchen floor. For the first time in many months, there were no letters tucked under the door, no notices left in the mailbox, no sharp knocks demanding attention. The house was still. He poured a cup of coffee and stepped onto the back porch. The new cedar fence stood quietly, glowing a warm honey color against the bright green of the grass. Beyond it, the lake sparkled under the rising sun. It looked like a painting, calm, timeless, untouchable. Emma soon joined him, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, Dad," she said with a small smile. "Morning," Michael replied. "Sleep well?" "Better than ever," she answered. "It feels safe now." Michael nodded, his own thoughts matching hers. The fence had changed more than the view. It had given them back a sense of control, a quiet certainty that their home truly belonged to them. Later that day, Michael visited the local hardware store where he worked part-time. His friend Tom, who had helped build the fence, was behind the counter. "How's the fortress?" Tom asked with a grin. "It's perfect," Michael said. "No new letters. Not even a shadow from the HOA this morning." Tom chuckled. "They know when they've been outplayed. You did everything by the book. They can't touch you." Michael smiled but stayed humble. "It wasn't about winning. I just wanted them to leave us alone." Tom nodded in agreement. "Sometimes the quiet win is the best kind." A week passed with no trouble. Neighbors came by to compliment the craftsmanship of the fence. Some admitted they felt inspired. "I've been thinking of adding something like that myself," said Mrs. Jenkins, a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 houses down. "It's not about hiding. It's about feeling peaceful." Michael thanked her and offered to share the name of the contractor. He noticed a soft shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere. People spoke more openly now, less afraid of the HOA's strict rules. The fence seemed to stand as a symbol not of isolation, but of quiet independence. Emma felt it too. She invited her best friend over for the first time in months. They played music on the porch and painted small signs to hang on the inside of the fence. One sign read, "Our lake, our home." "Do you think the board will ever come back?" her friend asked. Emma shrugged. "Maybe. But my dad says we have the law on our side." The 2 girls laughed and returned to their painting, their voices light and free. Despite the calm, Michael remained watchful. He kept every letter the HOA had sent in a neat folder, just in case. He double-checked the city permits for the fence and kept copies in a drawer. Experience had taught him that quiet did not always mean the conflict was over. One afternoon, a week and a half after the fence was built, Michael spotted Linda Harris, the HOA president, walking along the road near the property line. She wore a crisp blue jacket and carried a clipboard. Michael walked out to greet her. "Morning, Linda," he said, polite but firm. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she replied, her voice measured. "I was in the area and thought I'd check the condition of the path." "The path is no longer public," Michael said calmly. "But you're welcome to look at the property line from outside the fence." Linda pressed her lips together. "You understand this has made lake access difficult for many residents." "I do," Michael said. "And I also understand my rights as the property owner. The city confirmed everything is legal. I have no plans to change that." For a long moment Linda studied the fence, her eyes tracing the clean cedar panels and the neat flower boxes Emma had added. Finally she sighed. "It's a fine piece of work," she admitted. "Thank you," Michael said. Without another word, Linda turned and walked away, her clipboard tucked tightly under her arm. That evening Michael and Emma celebrated with a quiet dinner on the porch. The air smelled of fresh pine and summer grass. "She seemed different," Emma said, spearing a piece of grilled fish with her fork. "Maybe she's realized this isn't a fight she can win," Michael replied. "Or maybe she finally understands we only wanted peace." Emma looked out at the lake. "I like it better this way. It feels like ours again." Michael smiled. "It always was ours. We just had to remind them." Summer slowly turned to early fall. Leaves along the shore began to turn shades of orange and gold. The air carried a soft chill in the evenings. Michael and Emma kept up their tradition of fishing at sunrise. They built a small wooden bench by the water, painting it a deep blue to match the sky. One Saturday morning, while the mist still curled above the lake, Michael spotted a figure approaching the fence from the road. It was Linda again, but this time she carried no clipboard. She called out gently, "Mr. Thompson." Michael walked to the gate and opened it halfway. "Good morning." Linda hesitated, then said, "I wanted to apologize." Michael raised his eyebrows slightly. "We the HOA handled things poorly," she continued. "The board was too strict, and we didn't listen when you explained your side. The lawsuit was unnecessary. I can see that now." Michael stood quietly for a moment. "I appreciate you saying that," he replied. Linda glanced at the lake. "It's beautiful here. I understand why you wanted to protect it." Michael nodded. "It's not about keeping people away. It's about respect. I hope the neighborhood can move forward without this tension." Linda gave a small smile. "So do I. We're reviewing some of our rules. Maybe fewer letters, more conversations." "That sounds like a good start," Michael said. They exchanged a polite farewell, and Linda left. As autumn deepened, the neighborhood grew friendlier. Children played near the road, neighbors shared apple pies and warm drinks. The fence remained, strong and golden, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like part of the landscape, a quiet reminder of boundaries and balance. Michael found himself greeting neighbors more often, sharing fishing tips with those willing to take the long drive to the public launch. He even offered advice to a young couple thinking of buying a lakeside property. "Make sure you know your rights," he told them with a gentle smile. "And stand by them if you need to." Emma, now more confident, started a small nature club at school. She invited friends to learn about local birds and fish, bringing them to the private side of the lake with her dad's permission. "I want to share it," she explained to Michael. "But in the right way, respectful and quiet." Michael felt proud. She had learned the lesson well. One crisp evening, as the first stars appeared, Michael and Emma sat on their blue bench by the water. The cedar fence glowed faintly behind them, its flower boxes now filled with late-blooming mums. "Do you ever wish we hadn't built the fence?" Emma asked softly. Michael looked at the lake, the moonlight shimmering across its surface. "No," he said after a moment. "Not because it keeps people out, but because it reminds us of what matters. Home. Family. Peace." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "I like that," she whispered. They stayed there in silence, listening to the soft lap of the water against the shore. The troubles of the past months felt far away, like a story that had finally found its ending. The lake stretched wide and endless, reflecting the night sky. And behind them, the fence stood steady, not a wall of anger, but a quiet line of strength, holding their world in calm balance. As the stars deepened overhead, Michael felt a deep gratitude settle in his chest. He thought of the long road they had traveled, the false fine, the letters, the lawsuit, the endless arguments. All of it had led to this moment of quiet, where the only sounds were the gentle splash of a fish and his daughter's slow, contented breathing. He knew the HOA might never fully understand the peace they had protected. But that no longer mattered. The lake was theirs to love and care for, and the lesson was simple: sometimes the strongest action is a calm, steady stand. With the cool night air around them and the water shining like glass, Michael and Emma sat together until the moon rose high, the fence a silent guardian of their hard-won freedom.